Why America and the West is collapsing, reason number 1. This is going to be a continuation of the video that I posted recently about the collapse of America and the West. And although this is reason number 1, this doesn't necessarily mean that it is number 1 on the priority list. There are just going to be different reasons that I throw out there, but this is going to be the first video, so that's why it's number 1. And it can kind of be one of the most important things because it contributes to so many different problems that we have. But what is this reason? This reason is the obesity epidemic. If you don't know the statistics, yes, I can speak on obesity in this country. And again, I'm just going to speak on the United States because that's what I have information on. But in the Western world, Europe, Canada, things like that, they're definitely trying to catch up to the United States in regard to those numbers. But if you don't know those numbers, I actually did a presentation for a Rotary group here by me very recently, and it was all about this sort of thing. So I kind of want to use and read off some of these statistics so that you can understand where we're at in regard to obesity in the United States. So statistics wise, 80% of the population, around 80% of the population falls into two categories, overweight and obese. And we're just gonna focus on obesity, where obesity is 42.5% of adults, and it's 21.2% of children ages 2 to 19. So 42% of adults fall into that category of obese. If around 80% are overweight and obese, that means around 38 to 40% are overweight as well. So you have to become overweight first before you get to obese. And the reason why this is a problem and a, pun intended, no pun intended, but a growing problem is in 2018, or not 2018, in 2012, these numbers were at 68% for the total population and about 33% for obesity. So it's gone up about 10% for obesity, over 10% for overweight and obesity in the population in the last 10 years. So we're not making a dent in the problem when we have more personal trainers like myself, more nutritionists, more health coaches, more emphasis on health and fitness than we've ever had. And that problem is just getting worse and worse. Now, what does this have to do with a collapse of the Western world and the United States? Well, you might think, well, hey, if we have enough food, then, being obese, that's almost like a sign of our wealth. Well, it is a sign of our wealth, but that doesn't mean that we're going to be a thriving society. When you can't do some of the most basic things for yourself because you're too heavy, it's too difficult to do, getting down on the ground, getting up, moving around. Now, some people who are obese don't have these problems, but as a personal trainer, I deal with people who their lives are impacted by these things and they want to change. And it's not that easy. Like I said, when you have health coaches and nutritionists and all these things, and more than we had in 2012, but now the problem's worse, we're not helping the situation. We might have all the information and we might have the tools to help people, but there's a bigger and deeper problem that goes beyond it. And one of those issues, and I'm going to talk about this and maybe another reason for the collapse, is food addiction. We're not treating obesity like an addiction. We're treating it like, hey, you just need discipline, right? That's what you'd expect someone like me, a personal trainer, to say. You'd say, hey, you just need to work out more and eat less, which is true, but it's not that simple, right? If you're addicted to alcohol, you might know that it's terrible for you, but it's not just an easy thing of just putting away the drink. You have this physiological addiction, you have the time that it's spent along with it, and then you have all of these other behaviors that go along with it in regard to your friends or your activities, or like I said, this time that you're spending doing these things. So in the United States, if we look at those numbers, if 80% of the population is overweight or obese, then a small percentage of the population, a minority, is considered normal weight. And that doesn't even mean that those people who are normal weight are healthy. because you have people who are anorexic or too skinny, and then you have people who might have disease and all other sorts of issues that go along with it. So we really have a healthy population of minimal percentages. I mean, somewhere 5 to 10% of our population is actually truly healthy. It might even be less than that. So what does this mean for a society? Well, look at what's happening with fertility numbers, right? People aren't, fertility clinics weren't even a thing in the past. Now they're everywhere. So people can't even have babies. People talk about, oh, you just have a kid. It's not that simple. It's hard to have a kid, especially now. And when you're obese, you have more and more health problems. And people now are going to say to you, it's okay to be obese. You can be healthy and be obese, which is true. You can be both healthy and obese at the same time. That is not a false statement. But it does not mean that you will continue to be healthy for that long, because the strain on your system is dramatic. Now, that's just an individual. The organs, the heart, the liver, all of these things that have to go through these processes every day to take care of someone that is at a normal weight are going to be less and easier to deal with than someone who is obese. Then you have all of these other problems. And I'm going to use my presentation and kind of talk about some of these risks that go along with it when you become obese. And it's a direct relationship. Again, people are going to tell you that it's not, that you can, but not for long. As you go up in your weight, it's a direct relationship to things like type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease, stroke, sleep apnea, fatty liver disease, gallbladder, kidney disease, osteoarthritis, cancer, vision problems. Lots of these different things start taking place as you get heavier and heavier. And so when we have a population where that's the new normal, and it's being even more normalized within our culture, saying it's okay, for me, I look at that and say, well, how is the population going to survive when people aren't going to live very long? You don't live very long as well. Your actual lifespan decreases dramatically when you hit obesity. And then there's also categories 1, 2, and 3 of obesity. And then there's categories of morbid obesity, 1, 2, and 3. Would you really like that to be part of your classification as a human being? Morbid? Not very good, right? Well, we have those types of things that are associated with it. And that's just on the individual level and the strain that it causes for that person. Now, there is genetic variation, and some people can get away with being a little bit heavier, but human beings were not designed to be obese. They just weren't. And people blame genetics all the time. They say, oh, it's in my genetics, right? My mom was fat, I'm going to be fat, my kids are going to be fat. Well, when we really analyze that and we say, okay, well, let's take a look at that. Let's take a look at those genetics. Maybe you do have a genetic history of heart disease, fatty liver, type 2 diabetes. But why? This is something that people don't ask. The question why. As a philosopher, we have to ask why. And I want you to continue to ask why. When you look at that, you can just go ahead and blame genetics. But to me, that's a cop-out, because you might have a genetic propensity for these things. Yes, it might be easier for someone to get type 2 diabetes than someone else. But why are their mom, their brother, their sister, their kids, why does that happen in their family? It's more, and again, this is not my opinion, this is people's opinion who have done the research, who have studied this thing for years and years and years. They always come to it and say, it is the habits of the people around. And this is why it's affecting the population at large. How did I give you that number of 42.5%? Is everyone's genetics shit in this country? 42% of people's genetics are terrible? No, we're addicted to food. Our habits are that of eating too much, doing too little. It's a simple process, calories in, calories out, but it's hard to do, especially if you're addicted, and especially if you don't have any other source of pleasure, or if you don't feel good about yourself. I mean, what does food do to you? It makes you feel good. There are actual chemicals in foods that are addictive that are naturally in there. In mother's milk, there's opioids called casomorphine. It's a morphine-like substance. And why is that there? It's there so that when you suckle as a baby, you get addicted to the milk so that you can continue. Imagine if you didn't want to suckle, right? If you didn't like the taste, you're not going to, and you're not going to grow, you're not going to survive. So you need to be addicted. Plus, it binds the mom and the child. So it gets that relationship going as well. So they're there. But that's also in cow's milk. So every time you drink cow's milk, you're getting this rush of an opiate-like substance, a morphine-like substance that gets you addicted. That's why people love cheese and milk and cookies. So there's also things in gluten, wheat products, gluteomorphine. So we have these things in foods that your genetics are hardwired to feel good with. And if you don't have anything good in your life, you're gonna look to things like food. People talk about being chocoholics, right? They love chocolate and it makes them feel good. Yes, but when we look at food as pleasure, that's how easy it is to then go from a 100-pound person to a 200-pound person to 300 to 400. I used to think it was a very difficult thing to do. I said, there's no way that would ever happen to me. And then I started looking at it and go, hey, this could easily happen to me. I've been addicted to food. I've been addicted to sugar. Now my lifestyle habits have been very active. I'm a personal trainer, so I've never really shown that I've had that problem. But let's just say I lost my job, or I lost the energy to actually go out and do my job, and I just fell into a deep depression, or I got injured and I couldn't work out, right? And one thing led to the next. It would be very easy to end up very, very overweight and obese. So I don't look at it now as someone saying, you just need more discipline. I understand that there's a multifaceted, a thing that's going on with people. People are messy, people are sticky. But in the society, like we're talking about, when everyone now is going through these same things, and that's the new normal, and you look to your left, look to your right, and everyone's the same, you start to accept it. When again, we're not designed for that. You're just not. And there are so many other problems. I talked about fertility, all the other diseases. Your society is not going to be around very long if you got people who can't make babies and who are dying. I mean, that's a simple fact. But now let's talk about the collapse, right? That's a collapse of population. So that's going to contribute to the collapse of the Western world. But let's just talk about from a monetary standpoint. Let's just talk about the economy. So some of these statistics that go along with healthcare costs, and these are numbers taken from 2011 to 2016. So this data is old, number one. It's hard to find this data because it's getting more and more taboo. People don't want to talk about these things because they don't want to put the blame on obese individuals, right? Well, healthcare costs, obese individuals incur about $1,800 more healthcare costs per year compared to someone who's at a normal and healthy weight. And again, normal and healthy weight people can still have problems too. So you're adding problems on top of problems. Severe obesity is $3,000 per year more. Again, 2011 to 2016 data, $170 billion in excess healthcare costs just in the United States alone each year, $170 billion. We want to balance the budget. That is a huge chunk of change that we could be dealing with, but that doesn't just affect our healthcare. And again, those are conservative numbers, very conservative numbers. When I was talking to people after I did this Rotary speech, they were like, your numbers are way, because I'm not there. He said, one of these people that I was talking to, he manages different companies, and he said, people, when they do these analysis, they're only taking into consideration like an individual's healthcare costs, right? Because like you would say, okay, this person's obese and they have these problems and they have these issues. So these are the excess costs that it comes along with that. But we're not seeing is what then happens on top of that with childbirth, okay? There's premature babies, there's all these other issues that go along with it that add and incur more and more costs. So very conservative numbers, 170 billion a year. But then workplace costs. If I'm not working because I'm sick or I have some form of disease or I have some injury or what have you, the workplace is not producing. So we have the offset, right? We have 170 billion that we're spending more on healthcare, but then we're losing 115 billion in productivity. Again, that's from the same study. Transportation costs. Now these things I couldn't even find anywhere near 2020 data or 2022 data for transportation costs. So if you're heavier, it's going to cost more, right? If I put one person in a car and drive versus I put 5 people in a car and drive, the gas mileage is going to go down a little bit. Well, those numbers add up. If you're on buses, if you're on airplanes, which use fuel, airlines use estimated $350 million additional gallons, 350 million gallons of fuel excess, 938 million extra gallons of gas per year, which for them when their cost is $3 billion. Well, wouldn't we like gas to be $3 per gallon right now? Ooh. So again, numbers taken from 2004. So we've got individual costs. You're going to have more disease. We have the economic costs. We have the societal costs. Hey, we're not going to be able to make babies as easily. These fertility clinics, you know that they don't really put out their numbers in regard to their success rate because they don't do very well. Yes, they can make money by having people spend 10, 15, 20, 30, $50,000 to help them get fertile, but their success rate is still very low. That's why it's very hard to find their numbers on, hey, these many people came to our clinic and this many people had kids. It's hard to do. We like to think, oh, we just make babies. That's true, but it's getting harder and harder because of our fertility. And one of the direct causes is, again, due to excess weight. So it's a multi-pronged thing. There's lots of problems that go along with it, but you can see the economic demand that it takes, the societal demand, and I feel like just that one problem, I'm going to talk about many issues, many problems, the reasons why we're collapsing in the West, but just this one could cripple an entire Western world or an entire nation, just having this one problem. And again, it's just getting worse and worse. The coronavirus pandemic has made it even worse. I believe that they came out with some numbers from 2020. And again, we're going to see it even worse for 2021 and even probably worse for 2022. But they said the biggest jump in obesity happened between 9 and 16-year-olds. So if you're starting off before you're even 18, before you're even an adult, in your developmental stage, and you're becoming obese or you're gaining all this excess weight, that's going to set you up for so much more failure later on in life. If you want to try to reverse that, it's a lot harder. They've done studies with people who continue to do sports from high school or from junior high to high school to college. Kids who stop in junior high, they stop with an athletic life. They don't work out. They don't take care of their health as much as kids who continue athletics into high school. Those kids do better, but kids who end up in college, even doing sports, do better as well. So these relationships to what you're doing when you're young, those things end up making a pattern for you later on in life. And if our pattern is to eat for pleasure, and we have terrible quality food, and we have a society that normalizes being obese, what do you think the normal pattern is going to be for people? That's what they're going to do. And again, I understand it. I'm not saying that you're wrong for doing this. Everyone has free will and they can do these things, but on the level of the collapse, you can see how this is going to affect us with our economy and how this is going to affect us just as an individual, how this is going to affect us societally, and how this is going to affect our future if we're not able to procreate because fertility is a problem or people aren't alive because their lifespan is being shortened by disease that's directly related to how much they're eating on a daily basis. So it's messy, it's sticky, it's difficult. Let's see if there was anything else I wanted to talk about. This it's a challenge. It's a challenge. But again, I believe that this is one of those contributing factors to why we're dealing with so many problems. I'm going to talk about more of these reasons. This is reason number one. It's by no means the number one reason. It's just the first video in the series that I'm talking about. Check out my introductory video that I made, and that explains a little bit more about societal collapse in general, so you can understand more about just the generalities in regards to it. But I'm going to continue to post videos on the reasons why, and we need solutions, right? I'm not just here to be doom and gloom. I'm here to talk about these things so that we can create solutions. And As a personal trainer, I've failed over and over and over again by trying to help people, because it's not just a workout and eat less problem. There's a psychological problem. There's an addiction problem. There's a lot that goes into this, and we need help. Everyone needs help. So to talk about these things and get it out there, and to get people to start realizing that we do have a problem, that's the first step. Now, what do we do about it? So I need your help. Everyone needs each other's help. We need support for these things. If we're going to stop the collapse, I don't know if we can stop the collapse, but I'm going to continue talking about these things. That's reason number one, the obesity epidemic. And until the next video, I will see you then. Thank you.